Today, we're going to be talking about what it's like to take a long hiatus from watching the children to going back into the workforce. What are the things that you need to know? What should you do? What should you not do? And what you should be prepared for. You don't want to miss this. Hello, podcasters. Welcome to the second episode of Behind Her Business. Today, we have a topic I'm very excited about. We are going to talk about returning to work after a long hiatus, watching the kiddos. And I have the perfect person for us to talk to because she's been through this. She will tell us her experience. She has really great advice. I think this is going to benefit everybody listening to this podcast that may be in this same situation. I would like to introduce everybody to Miss Stephanie Merritt.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So those of you that don't know, Stephanie and I are two peas in a pod. She's actually my VP of Creative here at KJ Marketing Group, and she's amazing. I actually call her Wonder Woman because she juggles everything, and you guys are going to hear all about it. But Stephanie, I want the audience to understand who you are. You know, where do you come from? Give us your story. What's your story that led you to that situation where you were going back into the workforce after mothering full time?
Yeah. So essentially, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, where I met my husband, who's not from Baltimore. He's a New Yorker. He would kill me if I didn't say that. But he got a government job. And so we were moving around. We were moving from city to city. And it was just, when I left my position in Baltimore and we moved, our first place was basically New Orleans. And while we were in New Orleans, we were engaged, but got pregnant. So I was pregnant with my first child, and we were going to kind of keep everything going as normal. We were going to still have the big wedding. We had paid all the deposits. We had done all the things. And then I had my child very premature. So I had him at 23 weeks and 6 days, which is kind of like just viable, at least then. I know people are having babies a lot sooner, and they have successful medical journeys.
But that's early.
It's very early. I mean,
yes.
He was due November and born in July.
Okay.
So it was...
So lots of stress.
A lot of stress. And so it was a no-brainer, right, as a mother. You have a child who's premature, you know it's going to be a long road, so you go home.
Absolutely. I wouldn't even think twice.
Exactly. So conversation with my husband, I was home. So he was in NICU for about 6 months. It was a long time.
I can't even imagine.
It was a very long time. But I had left an agency position. So I was working with an agency, and that's where I really honed my skills.
Now you were full-time with the agency?
I was full-time with the agency.
Okay.
I was pregnant, working. While he was in the NICU, I was still working, doing everything that you would do. I was pumping because, for breast milk, we had bought a deep freezer. So we added all the milk to the freezer. And I was going up there every night after work. I would, you
just
scrub
see
your
your
hands.
baby.
Yeah, you scrub
Mama
your
bear.
hands. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh,
Mama bear and their babies.
So if anybody from Children's Hospital New Orleans is listening, I'm better now. I'm much nicer.
She's just a little crazy back then.
I was a little bit crazy at the time. First child, it was nuts.
Well, the funny thing is with the first child, you're overprotective anyways. So, I mean, I can only imagine being in that situation. On top of that, I mean, that's tough to...
Well, you know the book. I call it like the pregnancy Bible, what to expect when you're expecting. I literally lived in that book because I didn't know anything.
I didn't read the book.
You didn't?
It's probably apparent now.
Yeah. But no. Oh my gosh. She's like, don't listen to this one. But I mean, you've been around family too. So when we were in New Orleans, I didn't have family. It was just me and my husband, and I've never been pregnant before. So it was all new to me. But I was working and pumping and doing all those sorts of things when I was agency, and probably a bit naive about what was to come, right? I think I thought I could keep my career, keep my job, keep progressing in this field and still be a mother because that's all I knew. I had never seen anybody face these sorts of challenges.
You were never before that given the opportunity to stay at home.
No.
So in your mind, you had this baby. You were doing that, of course. You were momming, and then you were also working full time.
Yeah.
So you thought that you were going to be able to continue this.
I did. I was like, well, this is my life now, and it's okay. But I had a really great neonatologist who had actually invited me outside of the hospital, and she talked to me about what to expect and what was to come with my new son. And it was a lot of paperwork, right? You have to sign your child up for all of these government assistance programs and therapies, and it was just a barrage of just things that nobody even in my family, understood. And so I talked to the owner, his wife, and I was like, I got to go. And she was fantastic with me. Mm-hmm. She really was. She was like, I like, just like what you said, as a mama, she was just like, I 100% understand. And we wish you, the best of luck. We're here for you. And it was very amicable, and it gave me peace, right, mm-hmm. to be home. So once I came home with him, well, once you start, it's like the babies don't stop. Then it was like, we were moving around.
Then you got pregnant again when?
I got pregnant again. Keegan was 4. So my oldest was 4.
So you were home for 4 years?
I was home for 4 years.
Okay.
And I dedicated a lot of time to him. Mm-hmm. Once I felt like we had a system going, I started to freelance. And I had made some really great relationships, right, being in the field. Mm-hmm. So people had an opportunity to see my work. And you remember, at this time, we weren't so heavy digital. We were still pretty heavy print. Mm-hmm. So those timelines.
Well, this was what, 15 years ago?
Yeah, longer than that.
Yeah.
He's 17 now.
Okay, yeah.
So, print timelines are not digital timelines. Mm-hmm. Print is a little bit more generous.
A few weeks rather than tomorrow.
Exactly.
I get that.
Rather than, can I get it at the end of the day? EOD seems to be the phrase. But, so, it was more generous. So I could do that. I could do that from home. But it was a constant start and stop as we moved from city to city, right? Mm-hmm. So it was like I would have to close up my business, then get to a new spot, try to reopen my business. Then it was close up. So it was like every 3 years we were moving.
You were starting over again in your career every 3 years.
Over and over and over.
But that's what you guys decided to do for the greater good of the family, right?
100%.
So you put your, I don't want to be, everybody says the woman always puts their wants to the side. Not necessarily all the time, but in your case, you had to put your wants on the back burner because number one, you have a special needs kid, and then you had 2 kids following. So after the 4 years, you had your second kid, mm-hmm. and then the third came and went.
In 18 months.
So altogether, you were out of work for how long?
About 15 years.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
We were moving around for about 15 years, and there was a lot of like scratching that entrepreneurial itch. It wasn't just me kind of like, and I am not like the quintessential, house mom, I guess you could say, the stay-at-home mom, which nothing wrong with that. I did it, and hats off to everybody who's in that role. Mm-hmm. But I don't thrive in it.
Now, how did you feel? Because I'm assuming you had other mom friends.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
How did you feel? And this is more of a side note because I know we've talked about this before. I feel like there's always this war, not war because it's pretty harsh of a word, but between the working moms and the stay-at-home moms. Mm-hmm. It's always a thing. Mm-hmm. And you're guilty either way. Mm-hmm. If you're working, you're guilty that you're not there. If you're there, you're guilty because you're not doing something else that you probably should be doing. So I do feel like we as women need to give each other grace on both ends of that because it's hard both ways. Did you experience that when you were home for 15 years? I'm pretty sure some of the mom friends you had worked. What was that like?
You hit the nail on the head. Grace, ladies.
Yes.
Grace. Give yourself grace. Grace because you're a human being growing, learning.
Yep.
You weren't a mom until you had a child, that you were caring for. And I know we're all in different situations, mm-hmm. when it comes to children. But as a stay-at-home mom who struggled to get her business going, I was in this weird kind of flux, right? Mm-hmm. So it was like I felt guilty when I would devote the time, or if I tried to put the kids in like a Mother's Day out or some sort of daycare because I'm home. And then you feel like, well, maybe it's a waste of money.
Yes.
Or you feel the pressure to produce the income because you're taking these steps. So there's pressure that comes from multiple angles.
Yes.
And then you've got people with opinions. And your husband has one for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Right? Absolutely.
He's like, girl, what you doing? You know, like
When are you going back to work?
right, you're spending all this money. Where's the income? You know, where's the business plan? I need to read it, you know. So it was like you've got pressure from all these different sides. And to be real about it, like the kids, they didn't really feel it. I mean, you know, because it was good that they were in the Mother's Day Out programs and the daycares and stuff like that, because it gave them an opportunity to socialize.
Yes.
And they weren't there, like, they weren't living there. You know what I mean? I just needed them to go somewhere for a couple of hours so I could dedicate personal time.
Well, you know, it's that thing that they say in the airplane, you have to put your mask on before you put anybody else's on. I think people don't realize that moms need some time away, and there's that guilt thing going on again, ladies. You're always guilty when you're stepping away. You know, sometimes I would go, not my husband's fault at all, love you, honey, but I would go to the store, I would go get my nails done for 3 hours, and I feel guilty. And I'm like, oh, I better go pick up the baby to go to the store because now I feel like he was with them for too long.
It's not even relief while you're there, because the whole time you're shopping, you're like, I got to get back.
Exactly.
Yeah,
or I'm looking, I got 30 minutes in this store before somebody texts me and asks where I'm at. So yes, I understand that. I understand. And I can only imagine 15 years. So when you went back into the workforce, like, because you were entrepreneur, you know, you already had that itch for a while, you were freelancing. Was there a time that you actually tried to go back to corporate? And what was that like for you?
I did.
Interview process, questions, what was that like?
I was about to say, it was pre-COVID and rusty. Oh gosh, I was rusty. I was messing up on industry lingo. The words weren't coming to me as quickly. And then when I'm coming back, I'm trying to come back a level up, right?
Yes.
So I'm not trying to come back as like a just kind of like basic graphic designer, because I have been designing. I've been trying to stay relevant in the field and working and things like that. So now I'm looking for a senior designer,
yes,
or, you know, creative director. And I have to sound the part, right? I have to try to sound like I can, you know, exist in executive management. And man, like one of my interviews, I felt I mean, luckily this woman was so sweet, and she was literally like feeding me the words, because she could just tell I was like,
she can tell you were out of the game for a minute.
Yeah, she could tell I was rusty. But she was fantastic. She loved me. But I wound up at another place, and this was pre-COVID, and it was sort of like, I was kind of like the creative catch-all. It was a woman, fantastic woman, has a heart for pets, but she had several entities and required the same effort for all entities. And it wasn't anything I could handle or keep up with. And I was in I wanted to prove myself. I wanted to prove to myself I could handle it. I wanted to prove to her that I could handle it. And I floundered a little.
Yes.
I didn't drown, but I definitely wasn't treading the way I needed to in that water. And luckily, COVID got me out of that.
Because then you had to stay home anyways and freelance, so that was a lot easier during the COVID.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, like, do we remember that? The
Yes.
kids came home for spring break, and then they just never went back.
Oh, I started my agency during COVID, and my daughter was upstairs homeschooling, and I had a little camera looking at her. And one day she took crayons and she drew all over her white bed, and I just was. I mean, I must have cried that day. I was so frustrated.
And the wax,
yes,
like crayon. You'd almost rather marker.
Yes,
I know.
I try to use, what is that? The Mr. Clean,
It's like the eraser,
yes.
the dry eraser.
That's that's the only thing that would get it out. Yep.
That's what it was.
But I'm curious on backing up to the interview process. So when they interviewed, and the reason why I ask this, I'm very curious, because we're very opposites, you and I. You were at home for 15 years, 3 kids. I have 2 kids. One happened a little bit later. He was our surprise. But I've always worked. So I've never not worked. And so there's times where, I'm not going to lie, I'm guilty as charged. I was, I would know people that stayed at home like, man, they must have it easy, or wow, how are they able to do that? And I'm very guilty of that because I'm human. I definitely don't see that now because I know people like you that have done that. And I know people, other really good mom friends of mine that have that opportunity. I think it's great because I do think that you don't get that time again with your kids. Once they turn 4, it's different. Like that year between 1 and 4 is so important and it's so magical. I don't blame a mom for wanting to be there, and I don't blame a mom for going crazy when they're there too much. So I definitely am curious from my perspective, if I'm interviewing somebody who hasn't been in the workforce, and I interview tons of people for 15 years and say they wanted to come into a senior position, my thought is, well, why should I give you the senior position? You should probably start here and move your way up because you've been out How did you handle, because you knew your worth. Mm-hmm. How do women that are listening to this podcast right now handle those questions? How can they position themselves for those higher level positions when they're out of work, if they know that they're going to go back to work sometime? And what are some things you would have done that maybe you didn't do to position yourself? So I guess it's a twofold question. How did you handle those type of questions? And number two, what would you recommend, or what type of advice would you give to women listening to this that are in this situation right now and they know they want to go back to work? They know they're going to stay home for a year or two, or maybe 15. Maybe they have a special needs as well, child. So what are your answers to that? What's your advice?
Well, I would say for me, again, I kind of came up in the print era.
Yes.
So the good thing is that I had proof, right? I could show. I had something tangible that I could show that I could do the work. And then, of course, back then it was references, right? I mean, that was where we kind of, the foundation that we had a tendency to stand on.
Yes.
What I would say now is I would take advantage of the era that we live in. We live in a very digital era. And luckily, there's a lot of education in many different genres. You have free education on YouTube. Now there are certificate programs with colleges.
I was thinking that too. For marketing, Google Ads, they have classrooms. If you go to SEMrush, they have tons of classes that you can take and get some type of certification during that downtime.
They have web design certificates, coding language certificates, UI UX certificates. I mean, there's so much now at our fingertips that we just did not have at one point. So I think that that's a fantastic way to show your relevance and that you're up to date, right? Because this, progress progresses, right? Yes. So as we continue to have more products and have more sophisticated products, if you can show that you can keep up with that pacing, I think that's extremely valuable. And the other piece is too, where you have to feel confident in is hopefully, well, maybe you're not a spring chicken.
You've done a little bit before.
Yeah, you
have some experience.
You and I are Gen Xers, right? Yes. So
best generation. High five. Yes.
So the good thing about Gen Xers is that we're sort of like the masters of none.
We could handle many things at one time.
I mean,
stress
my gosh,
stress didn't really.
It was just normal.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're kind of like the dysfunctional functioning generation, but we've done so many different things. And I think that is a valuable asset in this marketplace now. Whereas we have a tendency to sort of be one-trick ponies and, to kind of piggyback, because you know how much I love sports.
Yes.
I'm a sports mom. Okay, I'm the quintessential sport. I've got the big truck.
I'm getting into this.
Yeah.
I'm starting to understand everybody now.
Yes, she's like a rookie.
I always thought sports moms were so weird. I'm like, really? And now I get it. I am becoming one of you.
We are weird and we like it.
It's true. It's very true.
I mean, I was at the football game for junior high just the other day, just yelling and screaming. But, I've got the big truck. I've got, it's always filled with, fold up chairs and wagons, and I've got all the coolers. I've got all the things. And so, but what I will say is one of the things that I struggle with in watching my child kind of go through sports is that they all have training. They all have this very sports specific training. Mm-hmm. So they're not kids who play basketball, baseball, football, all the different sports. It's like, oh, I'm a baseball kid.
Yes.
And they do all of this training, and then the sports go all year round. I mean, if you're not in Texas, that's probably not your experience. But here in Texas, the weather has a lot to do with it. We can be outside all year round.
Oh, yes.
So it's not like in the Northeast where there has to be a season, because if it's an outdoor sport, it has to end. We're not playing in the snow. Mm-hmm. So here, though, you can literally play football all year round if you want to. And so I feel like it puts our kids at such a disadvantage when parents don't diversify their experience in all the different sports. Kids are experiencing burnout. Mm-hmm. I think that may be a source of some depression, because now they feel the weight of everything because it's the only thing that they have to focus on. It can be the same, right? It can kind of be the same. Be good at many different things. right?
Yes.
And bring all those things to the table.
I think try different things, but be really good at one. That's how I feel. Like I feel like, my daughter's tried many things. She's tried the tennis. She tried soccer. That didn't work out too well. And then when she got into her cheer and she got into her swim, then we saw her. I mean, the swim definitely.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
she's
she's
just
a rock
natural
star.
fish.
Yeah, she's a rock star.
So that was something that I was like,
feel
well,
like
we need to do
girls
this all
have
the
that
time.
advantage, though.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
It's a little bit different for men. So for girls, maybe that's one of our superpowers. You know what I mean? Is that we're not held to this one standard. It's cool to be, sort of this rainbow.
I like
of
that. I like the
things.
superpower.
Yeah, I think that
that's
might
true.
be like part of it. But you're right. Be really good at something and then have experience in all these different things. And again, coming back to it, you don't have to be an expert in everything. There's so much education on so many different levels, and it's literally at your fingertips. I mean, you can be at your kid's soccer game and listening to training.
Or portfolio. So I think what you're trying to say is the digital side of the business. Have your portfolio ready. We have so much. I mean, I'm actually very impressed because when I interview people now, back in the day, I had, portfolios were paper and there was never really a digital portfolio. Now I'm getting digital portfolios with all of this work. It's very impressive. So I think that's something that people can work on while they're outside of work. Like you said, taking classes, reading. Just reading. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. When I first started my agency, I didn't even know how to run YouTube ads. Not YouTube, I'm sorry, Facebook ads. I watched YouTube all night and figured it out. I mean, you would be surprised on the type of things you could learn. So all of the information's there. You just have to make sure that you are staying. And like you said, I tend to talk marketing because that's what we do. But in the marketing world, everything changes so quickly. And you have to do your research. If you're going to interview, make sure you're doing the research on the industry. And I think that's really important too. I think if you go in kind of defeated, or you might feel like you're not confident because you have been out of the workforce compared to other people that are interviewing that are coming from an amazing position where they've really honed their skills. What can you bring to the table as far as your knowledge, reading about the industry, knowing about the company? I mean, for me, that means a lot more to me when I'm interviewing somebody.
100%. And the other piece is too, like, we're not the market drivers.
Yes.
The market drivers are out of our control. That's Google. That's Adobe. That's, Facebook itself. I mean, they're constantly moving the target. So they force you. It forces you to be nimble. It forces you to be pliable. So when they're changing algorithms and AI now with the creation of AI, we don't really know the landscape on that yet. It's brand spanking new and everybody wants to use it. So,
and a lot of these things are free.
Yes.
For at least for the first few weeks. So there's some type of trial period.
Until they figure out how to monetize it.
Yes,
right?
yes.
On a more consistent and robust basis. But most things are, right? Because they want to get you hooked. And then all of a sudden they hit you with the price tag. Then you got to show the bag. But you've got to stay nimble. You've got to stay pliable. And if that's something that is innately a part of you, understand that that's a definite win. That's a definite plus. But that's what I would say. If you're, and even if you're younger and you don't have quite the paper trail, then I would say if you're home already, and this is another piece that some working moms didn't understand, like you were saying, it's got to be so easy for you. I was talking to another mom one time at a sporting event who was considering leaving her work, leaving her job, leaving her career. And she was like, tell me how you do it. And
There's another side to that coin.
Yeah.
Because we do that. Sometimes you have to make those decisions for your family, whatever that is, whether the decision is to work, whether it's to decide, I need some more time with my family.
Yeah.
And work-life balance. So what did you tell her?
Well, you could tell that she had already had this like preconceived notion that it was easy, right? And I was like, it's a sacrifice. It's a sacrifice. And unfortunately, we're like, and I talk about this all the time with my husband. I mean, most situations are compromises. There's always going to be one, no matter what you choose. And so I had explained to her about like the sacrifices that I had to make. And sometimes that reset button, no matter where you are in your life, is important to press. But what I would say is when you are ready to come back to your market, wherever that is to be okay with growing, be okay with having a starting point, Because, I tell my kids this all the time. I'm like, you're trying to eat an elephant in one bite. You're going to have to take a bite at a time. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes we do have to have a little bit of humility and humble ourselves and start at a different point, and kind of like circling back to what you said. Mm-hmm. When I came back after COVID, everybody kept saying, oh, there's so many jobs, but where? It just didn't seem like they were anywhere. And I was applying and applying and applying. And where we're based, I don't feel like this is a creative cornucopia, right? It's a bit of a wasteland. These jobs are hard to find where we live. And so I even had a tough conversation with my husband of like, maybe we need to move a little bit closer to the city where there's more jobs for me.
Yes.
There's more opportunities
more
for
industries, more positions,
100%.
more growth. Yes, I think that's definitely important. And I do like what you said about, the networking side of it too. But I think you made a really good point with finding the information online, really educating yourself. But I also think working your personal network is very important. Mm-hmm. Talk to people. You may have friends that there may be openings at their business. Like, work your network. Start getting into mom groups that are, entrepreneur groups or women that are, there's some type of group for you. Yeah. And I do think too that if you talk to people and you let them know your story, people genuinely want to help you. Yeah. I know people, it doesn't matter to me if somebody was out of work for a while. If I knew they did their research and I knew that they have been practicing their craft, whether it was freelance or whatever that may be, for me, it's all about attitude. I'd rather hire attitude any day, and I can teach somebody a skill.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think the attitude is very important.
So after COVID, when I wasn't getting the callbacks from the jobs and I was getting really frustrated by what was available. And even when I did get a call back, the job would be so far. I was like, I just don't think I can make this work. And so he was like, you know what? It's time. You've had your own company for a very long time. Let's just throw all the chips into it. And then that's when I opened my doors. Mm-hmm. That's when I opened my own, design house. And kind of coming back to that education, for products that I didn't feel as confident in, at least to monetize them, I contacted that soft network. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, let me do this for you for free. Let me play with you.
That's a really good idea. Let me do this for you pro bono so I can get the experience. That's a really good idea, ladies. Yeah. If you have somebody that you can do things like that for, especially if you're in like the design or whatever it is, if you can practice service for the experience, that's some really good advice.
So as I was learning new websites and new products and stuff like that, I contacted a friend of mine that I felt like, she had her own business, and I felt like she could benefit from it, and I could get the education, and then I could feel more confident, right? Yes. Because then you have that imposter syndrome, especially when you've been out for so long.
Oh, that's a whole nother episode.
Yeah, that
absolutely.
Right.
I think we've all been
rabbit
through
hole. That. Yeah. So it was like, that would kind of quell some of that. You don't feel that quite as strongly. And somebody gets, some decent work, because at the core, you're a professional, right?
Yes.
So no matter what you do, you're sort of approaching everything from that professional standpoint, and you want to provide a good product, at least to the best of your ability. And so this second time, because it was empowering too, right? Mm-hmm. To step out and start my own business, I felt very empowered. I felt very strong. And for him to agree with me,
you need to have that. They need to have your back.
I needed to have that.
You needed to have a cheerleader, per se.
Yeah. He went with me. He went with me to look at office spaces. We talked about the rent. We talked about how I was going to make the rent, what would happen if I didn't make the rent. We had all of those conversations up front.
Yes.
And now when you do hit those roadblocks, because not only do you have roadblocks in your business, right, but you can have them in your home life. Mm-hmm. And so when you hit a roadblock in a business, and we both know this, it has a tendency to affect the home, right? Because you're bringing it home with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's just be real.
Yeah, if you have your own business, you are never off.
It lives with you.
That's something that's part of what you do.
Yeah.
It's a part of you.
Yeah, it's an appendage. You're very honest. Mm-hmm. You're very open in the way you do business. And what I do find is when you're open and you're honest with individuals, that is the fastest, most efficient way to get things done.
Yes, agreed.
So when you...
Transparency.
When you're like, hey, listen, I know I scheduled this meeting for 1:00, but I have to drop off my kid, and then I can come back to you. I have some great things to tell you. I did my research. La 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 la.
Ooh, I have a good idea now. Okay, so you're bringing this. So I would say to moms, if you're a single mom and you don't have, you don't have a husband, because let's just be honest, not all husbands are going to be your cheerleader anyways. But what I would like to say is, like you said, maybe the person that you are going to work for or per se work with, they understand. Maybe it's another woman who understands that. I mean, I'll tell you, there's been plenty of moms that have worked for me, and if somebody has to go because they have to go to their kids' open house, I mean, that's completely fine with me. So I think maybe finding something in the job force that is a little bit more flexible. Maybe looking for a job that's more flexible. Understanding.
Yeah.
That is, yes. And also for me, and hopefully a lot of women have this, I didn't have this until I moved into my current neighborhood. I have a really great mom group.
Yeah, you do.
I mean, my mom
You've
group
talked
is
about
fantastic.
Yeah,
I mean, I would just love to have these ladies on because they're all so different, and we all love our children so much. And it's a great, they say it takes a village, and it really does. So if you can become build your community around you, because I'll tell you, there are times when I couldn't make it, to pick up my daughter for some reason, or I was running late, and I had one of my awesome neighbors who would do it with me because her kid goes to school with mine. So I would say to women that are listening to this and that, they're not married and they're single, make sure that whoever you're working with, and if you do decide to go back into the workforce, that you're working with somebody who understands and who's and that it's okay if you're transparent. Like, we don't always have to be, uber corporate and professional all the time. We're all human. We all have lives outside of what we do. And I think it's important to strive to work for a company that has that openness and that transparency.
And that's that elephant.
Yeah.
One bite at a time. Like, you may not be able to come right into that executive position. Maybe you have to take a different position because the kids do get older.
They get older, you're going to have way more time. And ladies, I know that, when we turn 40, in our minds, we're like, oh, I only have this much time left. You guys, people are doing a lot older these days. I mean, if you look at, I feel like 40 is the new 30 at this point.
Legit.
And I do think you have time. So let's just stop putting a time limit on what we can do.
Yes.
In our careers. Let's please stop doing that.
There it is.
Because, we're the ones who drive that narrative.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Yes.
That's very, very, very true.
But I think you've really, I want to thank you for coming on and having this conversation.
I hope it was helpful. So
I hope it was too. And ladies, I want you guys to let us know. Drop us a comment, a line. If you go to our YouTube channel, go to our website, behindyourbusiness.com. We have our podcast. You can drop a comment, drop a line. Please like, subscribe, share this with other women because we're going to talk about so many other topics. Yes. But we really enjoyed having you on, Stephanie. I think you have an amazing story, and I do think you are Superwoman.
Oh my
you
gosh.
are.
From one Superwoman to another. Look at this one. Well, we found each other. So
we did. We did. We'll have to have a whole podcast on that because it's a whole funny story. But hopefully ladies here are lucky enough to find relationships in business like we have. So I wish all of you guys luck, and I look forward to you guys listening to the next podcast.